What do you base your success on?
Well, I mean, I think the success that I've had as a member of Congress is based on what I was doing before I went to Congress, really. I mean, I was born and raised in this community in Charlotte, Mecklenburg. Grew up here, went to public schools here, went away to undergraduate school at Chapel Hill and to Yale Law School, but came back in the early 70s and spent a lot of time in the community because I came to a law firm that was in the process of changing the Charlotte community. And I've witnessed all of the changes that have taken place, many of the changes that have taken place in our community over the years. Going to Congress was kind of a logical extension of what I was already doing, and so I think that's been very beneficial to me. I've seen the challenges of our community, and I've seen the successes of our community, and I think I have had a better understanding of what those challenges are and what opportunities can be there if we take advantage of them to create opportunity for everybody in the community. So I think that's probably sums it up pretty well.
And I applaud you, sir, because you've done a great job representing the 12th District.
Thank you.
And I just want to ask a question as far as gun control. Do you think there should be more restriction on guns in our community?
Well, you know, the Supreme Court has now said that subject to certain limitations, the Second Amendment has as much force and impact as the First and the Third and the Fourth and all of the rest of the amendments. So in a sense, I guess that would lead one to the conclusion that possibly anybody's entitled to have guns anywhere, anytime they want. But there are reasonable limitations on every amendment to the Constitution. The First Amendment says that we should make no laws related to that would restrict speech or religion, but obviously we have multiple laws that restrict speech and religion. You can't scream fire in a crowded theater. That's the general legal rule. That would be the ultimate free speech if you could say anything, anywhere, anytime. And the same thing applies in gun control. Reasonable constraints can be placed on the possession, use, ownership, sale of guns, just like we can place reasonable restrictions on speech. And we've placed some restrictions on guns. We probably need to consider placing additional restrictions on the sale and use of guns. And so I'm open to that, although I'm not, it's not one of the things that I'm out there agitating for on a continuing basis, just like I'm not out there agitating to control speech more and more and more. I mean, it's all of these things have to be done with some degree of moderation.
Okay, I'm Frank McCleary, as you said, the mayor of Andrews, South Carolina, and born and raised there, and graduated from Andrews, South Carolina in 1982, and went on to Benedict College and was commissioned there as an officer of the United States Army, where I served for the past 29 years. And upon retirement in 2015, as I told Mr. Brown, I was then had a divine intervention, said I was going back home to become the mayor. And so here I am. So that's kind of in a nutshell. 29 years, we've seen a lot of things and traveled around the world. But now I find myself in Andrews and serving my second term as the mayor of that small town.
So with being over 20 years in the military, what made you decide on getting into politics?
Well, it wasn't politics itself. It was the fact that, I love my town, and I saw the decline of the town for over two plus decades. And so I knew then that I needed to go back home to provide whatever assistance I can for that town to come back up. And so it wasn't a personal choice. I said it was a divine intervention, and here I am. And so politics is what it is.
Yes,
but I see myself more as a leader in the town, and so that's where I am. And so we're that's what we're trying to get after.
Okay, so describe that feeling when you were sworn in to office as the mayor of Andrews, South Carolina.
Well, I would tell you it was quite different. You know, I'd done and seen a lot of things in the military, but this was different. I was back home. It was a huge buildup. You know how campaigns go, and my family was there, and so and I just knew the importance of what I was about to get into, and so the emotions, a lot of that had built up, and so then at the night of the conclusion of the election or the campaign. It was just overwhelming. You know, everyone was bursting in tears, and I knew then that's when I felt the weight of what we had to do and how far we had to go. And so it was just, but it was still comforting to know that I would be there to help my town begin to recover.
So describe that feeling coming from a childhood of Andrew to now being the mayor of Andrews, South Carolina.
Oh wow. Yeah. So then, as a child, and as I tell people, you know, you look at the finished product. Not that I'm complete, but you look at the finished product, and you would think that this was someone who has had it made throughout their lives. But in reality, as a child, we were in a home that really didn't have any insulation, no bathroom, no running water, that kind of stuff. We're talking about the 70s, and I graduated in '82. So my first real shower that I could say I owned was at Benedict College, the college that you and I went to. And so then coming from that and then maturing and moving through life and coming back now to see how things have changed and how I've changed, now I can understand where I am now and where people are that are still struggling. Okay. And so then I bring a personal experience to trying to understanding that you can move from where you are to where you need to be if you apply yourself. And so that's kind of how again, I think that's what I bring is unique to this position.
Will be Mr. Harry Jones, the Mecklenburg County Manager. How you doing there, Mr. Jones?
I'm doing fine. How are you today?
Outstanding.
Great.
I really appreciate you coming on the show, sir.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
What are the responsibilities as the county manager?
Well, let me just begin by saying that I serve at the pleasure of the Board of County Commissioners.
Okay.
9 members of the board. By general statute of the state of North Carolina, I basically serve as the CEO. I serve, again, at the pleasure of the board, but my responsibilities is to conduct the day-to-day affairs of the Board of Mecklenburg County, consistent with the policy that's been developed by the Board of County Commissioners.
Tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm an Army brat.
Okay.
I define my life as a charmed life. My father spent 30 years in the Army.
Yes, sir.
I was born in El Paso, Texas, at Fort Bliss.
Yes.
Traveled all over the country with my dad. Lived in places such as Fort Campbell, Kentucky, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Lived in Tallahassee, where my dad was an ROCT instructor with Florida A&M, and lived in Taiwan as a kid, back when I was in 2nd and 3rd grade.
Yes, sir.
Called Southern Pines home, which is where we moved to when my dad went to Vietnam in 1965 out of Fort Bragg. Happens to be really the hometown of my mother and the hometown of my wife, but it's the place that I lived the longest, so I call that home. We moved about every 2 to 3 years, being in the military up until I was about 15 years old. I have 2 sisters. Have been married, be 40 years in May. Have 4 children, 3 girls and a boy, and 5 grandchildren, 4 granddaughters and a grandson.
Is your parents still living?
My mother still lives. She lives in Southern Pines. She's 84 years old. My dad has been deceased almost 29 years. Actually, will be 29 years the 17th of December.
As your mother sees you now, what do you think she appreciates the most?
Well, my mom's very special to me, and it's always difficult for me to talk about my mom without showing some emotion.
Yes, sir.
I'm 62 years old myself, but I get a little mushy talking about my mom. She has been my strength. She has been the one who pushed me, not only to be respectful of others, regardless of race, creed, or color. Not only to give back in the community, but she pushed me, academically. I didn't do as well as I should have, but she was always there. And Paul, there's this book that people talk about that says that everything I need to know, I learned in kindergarten.
Yes, sir.
That's not true in my house. Everything I needed to know, I learned before I went to kindergarten because my mother taught it to me. My mother taught me about being respectful to elders, cleaning up after myself, just the basic fundamental things of how to relate to another person. Take your hat off when you enter a house. Don't interrupt adults when they're talking.
Yes, sir.
The kinds of things that your mother taught you as well, and those things have stayed with me all my life.
What was the biggest thing that you've learned from your father and that you still inspires you today?
It was the discipline, the making sure that things are orderly. I like things kind of like in neat stacks, and I like my closet to be
Correct.
neat. When you leave the house, to look presentable, make sure your shoes are shined and your clothes are pressed, and clean up after yourself. Police the yard. Those kinds of things that he taught me. But he taught me something else. My dad. The last time my father had to discipline me, I guess I was about 12 years old, and I had did not tell him the truth, and he disciplined me for it. He told me, he says, you don't get punished for me by telling me the truth about what happened, but you lied to me about what actually happened. Now, I might get punished, but I would not have gotten the corporal punishment that I got. I might have gotten restricted if I had done something that was wrong, but I learned a lesson there, and I can remember also when I was about 13, at 14, I raised my voice at my dad, and my dad kind of came up off the easy chair and popped me pretty good. I went back to my room for about 30 seconds. I came back and I extended my hand to him. I said, "Dad, I'm sorry for raising my voice at you. I'll never do it again." And he looked at me and he didn't say much, but I heard him tell a friend some years later. He said, "That's the day that I knew that my son was a man." And so those kind of impressions that you make, but he had taught me about how to seek forgiveness for things that you've done. And when I extended my hand to him, it was based on the spirit of the things that he had taught me.
It's really important to make sure that, one, we understand that the real thing that makes people operate or move is having an economic opportunity. There's no way that you can sustain yourself by having clothes on your back, shoes on your feet, a roof over your head, unless you have some type of opportunity that allows you to be able to be a part of the workforce or even to own your own business. And therefore, it's important from my perspective to making sure that in as much as I have the ability to create an opportunity for someone, that I do just that.
That's great. Is it fair to say that whether it's in the public or private sector, that all people should have the equal opportunity at one thing that makes them whole, and that's economic opportunities where a business can thrive? What do you feel about that?
Certainly, we all have preferred people that we want to probably hang out with.
Correct.
The same thing can be true in business. Some area businesses or companies have preferred lists where they want to engage with certain folks. And not all the time do people across the board get that opportunity. And so when you start talking about making sure that there's what I would call balance being in place, that's the one thing that we have to continue to have. And so people across the board, particularly women and minorities, need to be included in that, such that we create the type of city, the type of county, the type of state, and even the type of country that embraces men and women business development entrepreneurs, so that we can certainly make sure that each one of us has an opportunity to be able to be a successful either business owner or an employee in the workplace.
What's the Minority and Women's Business Development Program that
Yep.
they have in Charlotte?
Well, yeah, and you heard me just a moment ago mention
Correct. Yes, sir.
women and
What is it?
minorities. The city of Charlotte used to have a program called the MWBE program.
Okay.
The Women and Minority Business Program was a program basically that concentrated on gender as well as race, because the idea was it was needed largely in part because those segments of our population happen to be overlooked. And so in order to try to make sure that there was some level of inclusion, the MWBE program came about.
How is this program different from the Small Business Entrepreneur Program that we have in the city?
Okay, the SBE, or sometimes people call it the SBO program,
Yes,
Small
sir.
Business Opportunity Program, is different in that, again, the MWBE program was a program that was geared toward, it was gender and or race specific. The SBO program is not that. It's a program that allows pretty much any and everybody to compete on the same level playing field. Some people will say, well, if you do that, you run the risk of excluding those persons that would have been either a woman or a
Correct.
minority. And so that being the case, that's pretty much the difference between the two. One is the SBO is gender and or race neutral, while the MWBE program is not.
Why was the MWBE program disbanded? It was such a good program.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, I'm in something called politics.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And in as much as some people would have said that they had a concern rather that you had women-owned businesses that were fronts. In other words, they were pass-through companies where they were suggesting that the wife was actually in the ownership bracket
Oh, okay.
of being a part of the company, but yet she really didn't run it. The husband probably ran it, or the son probably ran it, or the nephew probably ran it, and therefore it was argued that it wasn't a legitimate company. That was one argument. Another thing that was out there, but really no one talked about, was the undercurrent of the idea that really no one wanted to have a program that dealt with women and minorities. An entity called the Southeastern Legal Foundation typically goes around the country, and all it does is dismantle programs like MWBE programs for women and minorities. They do it everywhere. Charlotte happened to be on their stop, happened to be on their list. And when they came, of course, they raised concern, and they filed a lawsuit. And as a result, the city council, we ended up having to take it up over into the wee hours of the morning, about 1, maybe 1:30 in the morning, where a decision was made to go ahead and nix the program. It happened by way of a vote that was probably, I want to say, 7-3.
Okay.
Yes. And so as a result, the program went away, and we now don't have that program in existence anymore.
Of Charlotte, North Carolina. What was the deciding factor in you running for the mayor position?
Well, you know, Paul, I grew up in Charlotte, and my husband and I are raising our children here in Charlotte, and we love the city. We want to see it realize its greatest potential. And, you know, about a year ago, when the need arose for an interim mayor, I heard from a lot of people in the community. I got phone calls, I got emails. People reached out to me and said, will you please consider running for this office? And I think that people were searching for transparency. They were searching for a community spirit, for someone who could collaborate, bring people together, focusing on teamwork and transparency. And when I looked at the community and all our potential, and I thought about the skill set that I could bring to the mayor's office, and I talked to a lot of people and my family, of course, I decided that this is a critical time for our city, and I really believe I could move the city forward.
How does your background as a former member of Mecklenburg County Commissioners, Board of County Commissioners, increase your expertise in the city?
Well, you know, I had the honor of serving the county
Correct.
for 8 years, and 5 of those I was the chairperson. And what that meant is that I was a spokesperson for not just Charlotte, but for all of Mecklenburg County, which includes 6 towns and the city of Charlotte. And I represented this county on a state and national level, serving on state and national boards. So I have had the opportunity to promote this region, our county and our city, before. I also have the perspective from a county commission standpoint of the connection between human services and infrastructure. And people always get confused about which things the city does and which things the county does. And the easy way to remember it is that the county is the people part of government and the city works on our infrastructure. Those two things are intertwined. And so you can't talk about a healthy community without talking about the physical community, sidewalks and greenways and things that people can use to stay healthy. Those are things that we construct. Those are infrastructure, but it has an impact on human services. And there's so many cases where I see that. And as a county commissioner, what you see is the connection between these things. You can't talk about thriving neighborhoods without talking about good schools in those neighborhoods. You can't talk about bringing jobs without also talking about a healthy place to live and a place where people want to live because of the assets that we have. And so every time that we look at a city service, we should also be mindful of the human services from the county side that are impacted. What I'd like to see is even better collaboration with the city and the county. And I think that having been a county commissioner, that gives me a unique perspective and opportunity to say, when we're looking at the city, let's make sure the county is included as well. Now, they're doing that pretty well right now, but everything can be better, and that perspective would help make that an even tighter relationship.
I know as a member of the board, you did an outstanding job, and I just want to applaud you for all the work that you did for the community.
Well, thanks, Paul. You know, one thing I found, whenever we had a challenge at the county level, when we reached out into the community, when we brought citizens to the table and we asked regular folk to have input and to help us get through a difficult time, we got better results. We have tremendous energy, innovation, and concern and care in our community, compassion. Cool. We were able to unlock that through several citizen processes. We did a master plan for Park and Recreation, where we went out into the community and said, what is the thing you love the most about your park system? And so now we have a master plan where we're going to actually try to meet those needs and goals of the people who live here. You know, what a great idea. When we had a library challenge with our budget, we got so many community volunteers that we were able to keep the libraries open longer, almost doubling the number of hours that we thought we could keep it open. That was totally through volunteers and community input and community contribution. That's what makes me excited about serving again, is really accelerating that connection, that inclusion of the citizen's voice, and reaching into every corner of our city to do that. Because we have a very diverse city. We have diverse neighborhoods, we have diverse people, we have different ethnic backgrounds, different languages spoken, and all of those things contribute to making us a great city.
When I was working with the city, there was a problem or an issue, and you look at, what other cities were doing, and you just pick one of the things that was best, working best, and you try it. But today, think about how much smarter kids have to be in school. You have to define the problem. You have to get data, all that data analytics, you analyze the data. Then you have to go out into the community. Citizen engagement is something that we're working on and doing more of. Okay. You then have choices, and then you have to convince people that that's the right choice. And it's not just convincing yourself or the city council members, it's convincing the community that that's the right choice for Charlotte. So I really love numbers and I love budgeting, and I can remember all of that. I love the idea of problem solving, but today it just requires a lot more. You have to engage with people to get things done.
I know you work a lot of hours as mayor, probably over 60 plus hours, and you're always around. How do you deal with that? I mean, that I know you have to put in a lot of effort.
I do, but I have a great team. I have people that help me with the schedule.
Correct.
They help me know where to go. They try to keep me on time. For me, it's the energy that's required to be available and accessible. I believe when you talk to people, you have to really pay attention to them.
Correct.
It's not one of those things that I can look at my phone or be glancing over your shoulder. I want you to know that you are the most important thing that I'm thinking of right then in that moment. So after I do that I think people would be surprised to know that I'm busy Saturday and Sundays.
Correct.
Mondays, we have our council meeting, and the only time that I usually don't have an invitation to go someplace is on a Friday afternoon or Friday night. So that's when I kind of recoup or revive myself. Okay. Every now and again, I take a couple of days to relax and kind of recharge, and that's an important part of it too. I need to realize that if it's just like in the airplane, you know, you have to put on your mask first before you can help others. So I'm trying to learn to do that better. I'm not always successful at it.
I know you're really involved with the families of the city.
Yeah.
And I know that's because you're so involved with your family. Why is it so important? Why is that such a valuable family?
You know, I tell people that I have about 20 first cousins.
Uh-oh.
And I grew up in a family during the segregation in the South. And that really makes a big difference because our parents tried to protect us from the world that was not always nice or was often more than that. I remember times my dad would work and wouldn't get paid for the work he did just because they didn't have to. And so that's when you know how family counts and what it means. All of my family shared every experience. When my mother found, something on sale, she'd call all of her sisters and they'd rush out and get it to save that money that made it possible for us to go to college or go to school. My dad worked and it was, it's one of those things. This is something that we need to learn more about doing as a people, as Black people. We actually worked with each other. So when my dad would have something in his business or one of my uncles would, they would pool their resources, their money, and work together. They built their brand as a family, not just as an individual. And so that's why family is so important to me today. I'm very fortunate to have a son who works here with Balfour Beatty.